The wind in the whispering woods never just blew, it carried voices. For years, I thought they were just the sighs of ancient trees, the secrets of old stones. But tonight, under the swollen eye of the harvest moon, I knew better. The wind knew my name. It had always known it. Ilara. I felt it brush against my cheek like a cold fingertip as I crouched in my usual hiding spot, a mossy ledge overlooking the Stonehaven Pack's sacred clearing. I was the archivist, the keeper of their stories, and a ghost at their feast. I documented their triumphs and tragedies, their bloodlines and battles, but I was not of their blood. I was the human they had sheltered, a puzzle piece that didn't fit, kept on the frayed edges of their magnificent, wild world. Below, the zenith gathering was a living painting of fire and shadow. Flames leapt toward the gold-tinged sky, and the pack moved with a unity that was a physical force. It was beauty, and it was agony to watch, because that circle of belonging had a boundary I could never cross. My fingers found the smooth, cold weight of the Riverstone pendant at my throat, my mother's last gift. "Remember," her fading voice echoed from a past I could barely grasp, "the deepest magic is in knowing your own soul. This stone remembers the heart of the mountain. You must remember yours." A figure below caught my eye, and my breath hitched. Alpha Kale. He stood at the heart of the celebration, a pillar of calm amidst the swirling energy. Even from this distance, his presence was a tangible thing, like the low rumble of thunder before a storm. His dark hair was touched with silver, not from age, but from the weight of leading every soul in the clearing. Beside him, on a dais of living rock, sat the reason for the hollow ache in my chest. The Luna's throne. It wasn't furniture, it was a piece of the forest itself, a sculpture of intertwined roots and stone, veined with luminescent quartz that drank the moonlight and pulsed with a soft, sleepy radiance. It had been empty for 5 long years, since Kale's mother, Luna Celine, had vanished. Her absence was a silent scream woven into the pack's very fabric, a loss so profound it had become a sacred space. No one went near it. It was a memorial, a ghost, a dream no one dared to touch. I had to leave. This was a sacred night, and my presence here was a trespass. I turned to slip back into the comforting darkness of the trees. "Ilara, you came!" The voice, as bright as a sunbeam, shattered my retreat. Lyra, Kale's younger sister, bounded up the path, her smile disarmingly genuine. She was the only one who ever sought me out without an agenda, a burst of relentless kindness in my isolated world. "I was just observing," I stammered, taking a step back. "For the archives. I was leaving." "Nonsense," she grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You're always watching from the shadows. Tonight you celebrate with us. You serve the pack too." Before I could protest, she was pulling me down into the clearing. The shift in the air was immediate. The music didn't stop, but it stuttered. Conversations dipped into whispers. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, their gazes a physical pressure that made my skin prickle. I was a discordant note in their perfect harmony. Lyra, oblivious or choosing to ignore it, dragged me toward the one person I wanted to avoid. "Kale, look, I found our archivist admiring the moon." Alpha Kale turned. His storm-gray eyes found mine, and the world narrowed to that single point of contact. He was a man of few words, his expressions as layered and unreadable as the forest at midnight. "Ilara," he acknowledged, my name a quiet rumble that vibrated in my bones. Not archivist, my actual name. That alone was a seismic event. "Alpha," I murmured, dipping my head, my throat suddenly too tight for speech. A commotion erupted across the clearing, a heated argument between 2 young enforcers. Kale's attention snapped toward it. "Excuse me," he said, and moved away with that unnerving, silent grace they all possessed. In the flurry, Lyra was swept away by friends, leaving me utterly alone at the edge of the sacred circle, the heat of the central fire warming my back. I needed to vanish, now. But as I took a step back, I felt it. A pull, not from outside, but from deep within my core. A resonant hum, low and sweet, like a plucked string tuned to a frequency only my soul could hear. My head turned, slowly, against my will. My gaze was drawn to the empty throne. The quartz veins within the stone were no longer just glowing, they were pulsing. A soft, milky light thrummed in time with the frantic rhythm of my own heart. The call was coming from there, an invitation, a summons that bypassed thought and spoke directly to the blood in my veins. Every sane instinct screamed at me to run. This was not my magic. This was not my place. But my feet moved. I was caught in a riptide, drifting to a destiny I had never asked for. The pack was distracted. No one was watching the human girl at the edge of the light. It would just be for a second, I told myself, a lie so flimsy I almost laughed. A single touch to understand this impossible pull, and then I would go. I stepped onto the dais. The air grew thick and heavy, charged with ancient power. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached out, my fingers trembling as they hovered over the cool, living stone. Then, with a breath I didn't know I was holding, I sat down. The world dissolved into light. A silent detonation of pure silver energy erupted from the throne, shooting up through my body and into the night sky. It wasn't heat or cold, it was life, ancient, conscious, and overwhelmingly powerful. The stone, which had felt unyielding, softened and shifted, molding itself to the contours of my body, as if it had been waiting for me, carved for me alone. The quartz blazed, and tiny star-like flowers bloomed instantaneously in its crevices, filling the air with a heartbreakingly sweet fragrance. A feeling of homecoming, so intense it was a physical pain, washed over me. Tears sprang to my eyes. This was where I was meant to be. And then, terror. I tried to stand, to push myself up, but I couldn't. It wasn't restraint, it was completion. The connection was so total, so intrinsic that separating from it felt like trying to tear my own soul in two. The throne had accepted me. It had claimed me. The silence that fell over the clearing was absolute. The drums died, the laughter choked off. Every member of the Stonehaven pack was staring at me, a canvas of shock, disbelief, and dawning outrage. The first voice to break the quiet was Elder Nessa's, a horrified whisper that carried like a shout. "By the great moon, what has she done?" Alpha Kale turned. His eyes widened as they landed on me, ensconced in the heart of the glowing throne. His face, usually a mask of composed authority, shattered into confusion and a fury so cold it stole the air from my lungs. He strode toward the dais, the crowd parting before him like wheat before a scythe. "Get up." The command was low, laced with an alpha's compulsion that vibrated in my teeth. Tears of frustration and sheer panic welled in my eyes. I shook my head, my voice a broken whisper. "I can't, Kale. I truly can't. It won't let me go." The Stonehaven throne, silent for 5 long years, had chosen its new Luna, and it had chosen me.
The silence in the lodge council chamber was a living, breathing beast. It was heavier than the stone walls, thicker than the smoke from the hearth. I was its captive, pinned not by hands but by the horrified stares of the most powerful wolves in the territory and the unbreakable will of the throne beneath me. It had glided silently after me, an obedient, terrifying shadow, and now sat like an accusation in the center of their most private space. Alpha Kale stood before the roaring fire, his frame blocking the heat, leaving me in a chill that had nothing to do with the room. He had not spoken since his command in the clearing. The quiet was worse than any roar. Torin, the lead enforcer, broke it. His voice was a gravelly scrape of contempt. The human has defiled our most sacred relic. The law is clear, Alpha. Panic clawed its way up my throat, sharp and bitter. I didn't mean to. I felt a pull. I only meant to touch it. The excuses sounded pathetic, childish. I was a child in a world of ancient laws and fierce, unforgiving power. Elder Nessa approached not me, but the throne itself. Her gnarled hand hovered near the armrest, not touching. "The throne does not respond to accidents, child," she said, her ancient eyes sharp as flint. "It has been a heart without a beat since Celine left us. If it holds her, it is by its own will." "This is absurd," Kale growled, the sound rumbling from his chest like distant rockfall. "She is human. The throne is of the moon, of the earth, of us." "Then remove her," Torin challenged, a grim twist to his mouth. Kale's jaw tightened. He gave a sharp nod to Ronan, one of the younger enforcers. The man stepped forward, apology in his eyes, but duty in his stance. "Forgive me, Archivist." His hands closed around my arms. The moment he touched me, the throne reacted. A silent, powerful pulse of silver light erupted from the stone. It wasn't an attack, but a gentle, irrevocable no. Ronan was thrown backward, landing on the floor several feet away, shaking his head as if stunned. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. "No one has ever been rejected by the throne while it holds its chosen," Nessa whispered, her voice filled with a kind of reverent awe. "The bond is absolute. To break it by force would be to break her." Lyra, who had pushed her way into the chamber, her face pale, found her voice. "Kale, you see, this isn't her fault. The old magic has spoken." "Magic that chooses a human?" Torin spat. "Impossible. This is a trick, some sorcery." A spark of anger, clean and bright, cut through my fear. I was sitting here, humiliated and terrified, being discussed like a faulty artifact. "I have no sorcery," I said, my voice gaining a strength that surprised me. "I have the clothes on my back and the dust of your archives on my hands. Why would I want this?" "Power," Torin answered simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "A human as Luna of Stonehaven. It is an unthinkable elevation." "An unthinkable curse," I shot back, my hands gripping the stone arms. The cool, living rock was the only solid thing in this nightmare. "I don't want your power. I want to go back to my books and my quiet cottage." "Yet the throne disagrees," Nessa interjected softly. She looked from my face to Kale's. "Alpha, the oldest legends are clear. The throne chooses for a reason. It sees a need in the pack that we cannot." Kale was staring at me, his gray eyes searching mine, looking for deception, for ambition, for a flaw that would explain this impossibility. All he found was my raw, terrified honesty. The fury in his eyes banked, replaced by a heavy, weary resolve that seemed to age him before me. "The throne has made its choice," Kale declared, his voice final. "For now, we must live with the consequence. Alara will remain under guard in the guest quarters. Nessa, you will begin researching every text on throne bonds and dormant magic. The rest of you, speak of this to no one. We have a pack to study." He turned to leave, then paused, his gaze falling on me. It was no longer just angry or confused. It was assessing, burdened with a new and terrible weight. "The guards are for your protection," he said, the words sounding like a warning and a promise. As they filed out, leaving me with 2 stoic enforcers at the door and the ever-present hum of the throne, the reality crashed down. The outsider was gone. In her place was a prisoner of fate, a problem to be solved. The throne's energy thrummed through me, a constant reminder of a bond I didn't understand and a destiny I had never sought. But as the door shut with a soft final click, a strange calm descended. For the first time in my life, I was not on the outside looking in. I was, terrifyingly, undeniably, at the very center, and the stone beneath me felt more like home than any place had ever. The guest quarters were a comfortable prison, a room in the lodge I'd never entered, with a window overlooking the territory I was now forbidden to roam. The throne sat in the corner, its glow a constant companion in the dark. Sleep was impossible. My mind replayed the horror on the pack's faces, the cold fury in Kale's eyes, the irrevocable feeling of the stone sealing itself to my spirit. Just before dawn, a soft knock came. It was Elder Nessa, her face etched with lines of worry and a strange excitement. "Come, child, bring it with you." She nodded to the throne. "Where?" "To the heart of your work, to the archives." We moved through the silent lodge, the throne gliding behind me. The 2 guards followed at a distance, their presence a shadow. The archives had always been my sanctuary, a kingdom of paper and peace. Now, as I entered with the glowing throne, it felt like bringing a storm into a library. Nessa went straight to the back wall, to the section holding the oldest, most fragile genealogies and land treaties. "Your mother," she began, her voice hushed, "the woman who brought you to the edge of our lands, did she ever speak of her family, of gifts, of seeing things?" A cold trickle of dread traced my spine. She had intuitions. She knew when a storm was coming. She could find lost things. She said it was just listening to the world. My fingers went to my riverstone pendant. "She was listening to a different current," Nessa said. She placed her palm against a seemingly seamless section of the stone wall. "The throne responds to blood, Ilara, to lineage. Your mother was not just a human seeking shelter. She was a starseer, the last of a line that served this pack as guides and oracles for generations. They carried the sight." The word hung in the dusty air. Sight. Visions. The thing my mother had hinted at, had feared. "She disappeared to protect you. She saw a conflict coming, a shadow within the pack, and believed her presence would be the spark. She hid you in plain sight, on the very edge of your birthright." The pieces were falling into a picture that stole my breath. My quiet, kind mother, a fugitive oracle. My entire life, a carefully constructed lie to keep me safe. "Place your hand here," Nessa instructed, her eyes gleaming. "Let the throne's energy flow through you. Let it speak to the memory in this stone." Trembling, I pressed my palm against the wall. The moment I made contact, the energy from the throne surged, a warm, silvery current that flowed up my legs, down my arm, and into the stone. A tingling spread from my fingertips. Before my eyes, hairline cracks in the wall began to glow with the same milky light, spreading, connecting, forming an intricate, luminous pattern. A circle, encompassing a river stone with a single, jagged white vein. My pendant. With a soft, grinding sigh, a section of the wall recessed and slid sideways, revealing a hidden alcove. Inside, on a simple pedestal, rested a small, beautifully carved wooden box. Inlaid on its lid was the same riverstone symbol in jet and mother of pearl. My heart hammered against my ribs. With Nessa's encouraging nod, I lifted the lid. Inside, on faded velvet, lay 2 objects. A delicate silver circlet, woven like intertwining vines, set with a single, luminous moonstone, and a leather-bound journal, its cover soft with age. Beneath them lay a sealed envelope. My name was written on the front in my mother's elegant, flowing script. My hands shook so violently I could barely break the seal. "My dearest Ilara, if you are reading this, then the path I feared has opened before you. I spent your life trying to shield you from this legacy, to give you a world of sunlit days, free from the weight of moon-drenched visions and the politics of wolves. Forgive me. You are the last Starseer of the Stonehaven bloodline. Our gift is not a gentle one. It is the burden of sight, of knowing paths not yet taken. The journal contains our history and ways to gentle the sight that sleeps within you. The circlet will help you focus when the visions come. Trust Elder Nessa, trust your instincts, and above all, trust the throne. It was crafted by the first Starseer Luna. It does not make mistakes. I am so sorry for the burden I place upon you. Know that I loved you more than destiny, more than Pack, more than my own life. Be brave, my darling girl. Remember who you are. With all my love, always, your mother, Althea. Tears streamed down my face, hot and unchecked, splashing onto the paper. The confirmation was a relief and a devastation. She hadn't just died in an accident. She had been hiding. She had been murdered for what she saw. And I was the reason. The weight of her sacrifice, the terrifying scope of my true identity, crushed me. I slumped against the stone wall, the letter clutched to my chest. I can't do this, I choked out. I'm not a seer, I'm not a leader, I'm just me. You are Althea's daughter, Nessa said firmly, placing a steadying hand on my shoulder. And the throne's chosen. You are far more than just anything. She picked up the circlet. It seemed to drink the dim light of the archives and magnify it. This is yours, when you are ready. I shook my head, backing away. I'm not ready, I don't want it. The throne behind me hummed a low, persistent note of agreement and a challenge. The path has chosen you, child, Nessa said, her voice both gentle and unyielding. You can only move forward. A shadow fell across the archive's entrance. Kale stood there, filling the doorway. His eyes took in the open alcove, the box, the circlet in Nessa's hand, the tear-streaked letter in mine. His face for a moment was utterly unguarded. I saw shock, a flicker of old grief, and a dawning, horrified understanding. The theoretical orphan was gone. In her place stood the daughter of a legacy he knew, a living piece of a past he had mourned. You found it, he said, his voice strangely hollow. Her legacy. And confirmation of her bloodline, Nessa confirmed, holding up the journal. Althea's daughter. Kale's gaze locked on mine. The anger was gone, replaced with a complex storm of pain, responsibility, and a reluctant, grinding respect. And what does Althea's legacy say about the throne bonding to her daughter? I wiped my tears, squaring my shoulders. I would not show him any more weakness. I held his gaze, the truth of my mother's words solid in my fist. It says the throne doesn't make mistakes. My voice was steadier now, grounded by a devastating truth. It also says my parents were killed for what she saw. Their deaths weren't an accident. They were murdered by someone who feared the future she envisioned. I took a step toward him, the circlet's moonstone catching the light. A future that involves me.
The truth of my blood was a key that unlocked a door in my mind I never knew was there, and now that door wouldn't stay shut. In the days that followed, the world began to speak to me in whispers of light and shadow. It started with flashes, a glimpse of Lyra's smile, but overlaid with a wash of anxiety so sharp it made my stomach clench, an echo of a worry she hadn't yet voiced. I'd touch a centuries-old ledger and feel not just the vellum, but a flicker of the scribe's tired satisfaction as he finished an entry. It was overwhelming, a constant static of other people's emotions and the lingering echoes of time. Kale had ordered the research to continue. He didn't visit, but I felt his presence like a pressure change. The pack was a held breath, waiting to see what their alpha would do with the starseer he never wanted. I spent my hours with Nessa and my mother's journal. The writings were part diary, part manual. She described the site as a river. To fight the current was to drown. The key was to become the riverdank, to observe the flow without being swept away. The circlet, she wrote, was a tool to channel and focus, to build those banks. On the third night, the static coalesced into a storm. I was in the archives, trying to meditate as the journal instructed, the cool weight of the circlet a focal point. The throne hummed beside me, a steady, grounding tone. I thought of Kale, of the heavy burden of his suspicion and his loss. I wondered what my mother had truly seen that forced her to flee. The pressure built behind my eyes, not painful but immense, like a tide rushing in. The scent of the archives, dust and ink, vanished, replaced by the pungent smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. The world tilted. I was in the clearing, but not the one I knew. The moon was a gibbous, a lopsided sliver of pale bone in the sky. Kale stood alone, his back to the tree line, a silhouette of solitary contemplation. The air was thick with a feeling of dreadful anticipation. From the deep gloom of the pines, a shadow detached itself, not a wolf, but a man, moving with a hunter's lethal grace. Moonlight glinted on a long, cruel blade in his hand. He raised it, poised to strike down at the unsuspecting alpha's back. I tried to scream, to run, but I was a ghost in this future, powerless, forced to watch. The vision shattered like glass. I gasped, my eyes flying open. I was on my hands and knees on the cold stone floor of the archives, vomiting nothing but bile. Tremors racked my body. The vivid, horrifying image of the raised blade was seared onto the back of my eyelids. "Ilara!" Nessa was beside me in an instant, her hands on my shoulders. "The clearing!" I choked out, my voice raw. "Under the gibbous moon, behind him, a blade! They're going to kill him!" The words hung in the air, toxic and final. Before Nessa could respond, heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. Kale stood in the doorway, drawn perhaps by the commotion or some alpha sense of disturbance. His eyes took in my prone, trembling form, the sweat on my brow, the terror in my eyes. "What is this?" His voice was hard. "A vision," Nessa said, her own face pale. "She has had her first true seeing." Kale's gaze sharpened on me. "What did you see? Tell me exactly." The command in his tone cut through my nausea. I pushed myself up, wiping my mouth with a shaking hand. I described it in broken, graphic detail, the phase of the moon, Kale's posture, the shadowy man, the lethal intent of the blade. "The gibbous moon is in 2 nights, Kale said, his voice dangerously calm. He began to pace, a caged predator. "That clearing, I walk there to twilight to think. Very few know that habit." "She also saw a traitor within the council," Nessa added quietly, gesturing to the journal. "Althea's final entries warned of a shadow with a name, the Ashen Claw, Fenris's pack, and an ally within our ranks." Kale stopped pacing. The name Fenris seemed to darken the very air. He was a former enforcer, exiled by Kale's father for brutal expansionist ideologies, a wolf who believed in strength through purity and conquest. "An ally, close to me," Kale repeated, his stormy eyes sweeping the archives as if the traitor might be hiding in the shadows. "Torin? Bowen? They have served for decades." "My mother died for this secret," I said, finding a thread of strength. My fear for him was now a burning, urgent thing. This vision confirms it. The threat is real, and it's here, now. He looked at me then, truly looked at me, not as a problem or a political complication, but as a source of critical, terrifying intelligence. The skepticism was gone, replaced with a grim, operational clarity. "Can you see more?" he asked, stepping closer. "The man's face, the exact time, anything that gives us an edge." The thought of willingly plunging back into that disorienting, violent stream made my head throb. I don't know how to control it. It just took me. "The circlet," Nessa urged softly. "Try now. Use it as a lens. Ask a specific question. Seek the detail. Do not let the vision seek you." I felt ill-equipped, a novice handed a sacred, volatile weapon, but Kale's life was the stake. I closed my eyes, my breath shuddering. I focused on the cool moonstone on my brow, using it to quiet the panic in my mind. I pictured the vision again, the raising of the blade. I didn't try to see the future. I tried to examine the moment I had already witnessed. Show me his hand, I thought, pouring my will into the request. Just his hand. The world softened at the edges. The scent of rot returned, fainter now. The image of the clearing flickered, less visceral, more like a painting I could study. I guided my focus, as Nessa instructed, to the assassin's hand gripping the knife. The details resolved. A strong, calloused hand, and there, on the back of the wrist, just visible as the sleeve pulled back, a tattoo, a simple, stark design, a claw mark rendered in ash-gray ink, the ashen claw. I pushed further, straining. The figure in the vision turned his head slightly, as if hearing a sound. Moonlight caught his profile for a split second, a strong jaw, a prominent, hooked nose. The connection snapped. I cried out, stumbling back, but Kale was there. His hands caught my arms, holding me steady. His grip was firm, impersonal, but his nearness was a solid anchor in the receding tide of the vision. "What did you see?" His voice was low, urgent by my ear. "The tattoo, a gray claw mark. It's one of Fenris's men." I squeezed my eyes shut, holding on to the fleeting image. His face, only for a second, a strong jaw, a hooked nose. I don't recognize him. Kale and Nessa exchanged a single grim look. "Rorik," they said in unison. "Who?" I asked, my head pounding. "A member of my personal guard," Kale said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Quiet, loyal, or so I believed. He has the features you describe, and he would know my habits." The betrayal in his voice was a cold, sharp thing. The abstract threat had a face, a name, and was a wolf he broke bread with. "Then the trap is set," Nessa said, her face like stone. "We know the when, the where, and the who." Kale nodded, his expression hardening as that of a warrior alpha. "We will be waiting for him." He finally released my arms, but his gaze held mine. In the gray depths I saw the storm of betrayal, but also a new, stark assessment. "You have done the pack a great service this night, Ilara. You may have just saved my life." The formal words were an acknowledgement. I was no longer just a problem to be solved. I was an ally, a weapon. Perhaps the first fragile thread of trust had been spun between us. The throne glowed warmly behind me, its purpose for this night fulfilled. The Starseer had awakened, and her first vision had set us on a path of confrontation. But as I looked at the grim determination on Kale's face, a new fear took root. Unmasking the traitor was only the beginning. Fenris and his Ashen Claw were still out there, and now they would know the Starseer they thought they had silenced had a daughter, and she was very much awake.
The next day was an agony of silence and stealth. The pack went about its business under a sky that felt too bright, too normal. But beneath the surface, Stonehaven was a warren of secrets. Kyle, Bowen, and Torin moved with quiet purpose, rearranging patrols with plausible excuses, ensuring Rorik would be free and unsuspicious when the gibbous moon rose. I was confined to my room, under the watchful eyes of the same two guards. The throne was a silent sentinel. The circlet lay on the desk beside my mother's journal, a beautiful, terrifying tool. I practiced the breathing exercises Althea described, trying to build the riverbanks in my mind, to find calm in the eye of the coming storm. Lyra managed to slip past the guards in the afternoon, her face a mask of worry. "Ilara, they say you're ill, that the throne's magic drained you. Is it true?" Her concern was a balm. I couldn't tell her the truth, and a lie tasted like ash. "I'm adjusting," I said, taking her hand. "The magic is strong, but listen to me, Lyra. For the next few nights, promise me you won't go wandering alone. Stay close to the lodge." Her eyes widened. "Why? What's happening?" "Just promise me. Trust your brother. And trust me." She searched my face, the playful glimmer in her eyes replaced by a sober understanding. "It's that serious?" "More than you know," I whispered. After she left, the silence felt heavier. I was a pivot point around which fate was turning, and yet I was utterly useless, locked away. As dusk approached, a nervous energy buzzed under my skin. The vision felt like a ticking clock in my soul. Just after nightfall, Kyle came. He moved like a shadow himself, dismissing the guards with a nod. He carried a dark, hooded cloak. "Put this on," his voice low. "You're coming with us." "What? But you said—" "I know what I said. Nessa believes, and I am inclined to agree, that your connection to the event may be crucial. You saw it. You might sense a shift, a wrongness that we would miss. But you will do exactly as I say. You will stay hidden with Nessa at the tree line. You will not make a sound. Is that clear?" It was a risk including me, but his eyes held no debate. He needed every advantage. I nodded, my throat tight, and swung the cloak around my shoulders, pulling the hood up. We slipped out of the lodge like ghosts, Kyle in his human form, moving with preternatural silence, and me doing my best to mimic his steps. Nessa waited at the edge of the forest, a wrapped bundle in her arms. She handed me a small, smooth river stone, warmer than it should be. "For grounding," she murmured, "the land's strength." The three of us moved through the dark woods. The gibbous moon cast a sickly pale light, turning the world into shades of gray and black. It was the exact light from my vision. A chill that had nothing to do with the air settled in my bones. We reached the clearing. It was just as I had seen it, the open space, the tree line where the assassin would emerge. Kyle gave me one last hard look, a warning and an unspoken question, before stepping out into the moonlight. He took up the exact position from my vision, back to the pines, a picture of solitary contemplation. My heart hammered against my ribs so loudly I was sure it would give us away. Nessa and I crouched in the dense shadows, the rough bark of a great pine at our backs. I clutched the river stone, its warmth a tiny beacon against the creeping dread. The throne's energy hummed within me, a low, steady current, connecting me to the very ground we hid upon. Minutes stretched into eternity. The only sounds were the sigh of the wind and the distant call of a night bird. Kyle stood, a statue of patience. I began to doubt myself. Had it been a dream, a hysterical fiction born of stress and newfound power? Then I felt it, a ripple in the fabric of the world, a subtle wrongness that vibrated through the throne's connection. It was like a foul odor on a clean breeze. My head snapped toward a particular patch of deep shadow between two gnarled oaks. There. I didn't dare speak. I grabbed Nessa's arm and pointed, my finger trembling. She followed my gaze, her old eyes narrowing. She saw nothing, but she trusted me. She gave a near imperceptible signal, a flick of her fingers toward the ground. A moment later, the shadow moved. It detached itself from the greater darkness, becoming a man, Rorik. He was dressed in dark, nondescript clothing, and he moved with the same lethal grace I had witnessed. In his hand, the long knife caught the gibbous moon's light with a dull, deadly gleam. The ash-gray claw tattoo was a smear on his wrist. He stalked forward, silent as a breath, his entire focus on Kyle's unprotected back. He raised the blade, the motion exact, practiced. Time seemed to slow. This was the moment, the fulfilled prophecy. Just as the blade reached its apex, Kyle moved. He didn't turn. He dropped, spinning low on his heel in a blur of motion. Rorik's strike met empty air. Before the traitor could comprehend, Kyle was up, his own hand locking around Rorik's wrist with a crack that echoed in the silent clearing. The knife fell to the soft earth. From the opposite side of the clearing, Bowen and Torin emerged, wolves one moment, men the next, blocking any retreat. Rorik's face, illuminated by the wretched moonlight, was a mask of shock that quickly twisted into snarling defiance. He was caught, but he wasn't broken. Kyle forced him to his knees, his alpha's power a crushing weight in the air. Rorik of Stonehaven, you are accused of treason and attempted assassination. Who do you serve? Rorik spit at the ground near Kyle's feet. I serve the future, a future you are too weak to seize. Stonehaven grows fat and soft under your peace. Fenris offers strength, purity. Where is Fenris? Torin growled, stepping closer. A cruel, ragged laugh escaped Rorik. Everywhere. His influence is a root beneath your feet, Alpha. You think you pluck one weed? His wild eyes scanned the tree line and landed on our hiding place. A malicious smile spread across his face. And you brought the little star-seer to watch. Good. She can witness the beginning of the end. His hatred was a physical wave. It crashed into me, and the world shimmered. The clearing, the captured traitor, it all faded behind a sudden, violent cascade of images, not of the future, but of the past, few months. Secret meetings in rain-drenched hollows, whispered words in the armory, the exchange of small folded notes, and a second face, a familiar one, nodding in agreement with Rorik's fervent words. The vision was a punch to the gut. I staggered, Nessa's grip the only thing keeping me upright. Kyle saw my reaction. Ilara? The name of the second traitor was a poison on my tongue, a betrayal so profound it stole my voice. I met Kyle's eyes across the clearing, and I saw the dreadful understanding dawn in them. He knew I had seen more. Rorik followed our silent exchange, and his defiance turned to panic. He knew his accomplice was revealed. The cellar, Kyle commanded Bowen, his voice like iron. Guard him yourself, no one else. As Bowen hauled a struggling, cursing Rorik away, Kyle strode towards us. The weight of the new revelation was on him, heavier than the first. He looked from my pale, shaken face to Nessa's. Who? The single word was laden with grief and fury. I opened my mouth, the name fighting to be spoken, but before I could utter it, a new sound cut through the night, not from the clearing, but from the direction of the lodge. A long, rising howl of alarm. It was the signal for a perimeter breach. The trap had been sprung, but we just learned a terrifying truth. It was only one piece of a larger, more dangerous game.
The howl of alarm tore through the night, shredding the tense quiet of the clearing. It wasn't a call of isolated danger. It was a rising chorus, a beacon of coordinated crisis. The lodge was under attack. Kale's head snapped toward the sound. All personal betrayal was instantly subsumed by the immediate threat to his pack. His eyes met mine for a fractured second, a communication of pure, shared dread before the Alpha took over. "Torin, with me," he barked, already shifting. The transformation was a fluid, terrifying miracle of coalescing shadow and expanding muscle. One moment he was a man, the next a massive midnight black wolf. He tore off toward the lodge, Torin a sleek gray streak at his side. Nessa gripped my arm, her old bones infused with sudden strength. "Come, child, the throne is your anchor. Stay close to me." We ran, my human legs clumsy and slow compared to the memory of their wolfen speed. The cloak snagged on branches, the forest floor seemed to rise up to trip me, but the throne's energy hummed within me, a reservoir of strength I drew upon, my breath coming in sharp, focused gasps. The river stone in my pocket burned against my thigh. As we burst from the tree line, the scene at the lodge stole my breath. It wasn't a full-scale assault, it was a razor-precise strike. The main gates, thick oak reinforced with iron, were scarred and smoldering as if touched by acid, not fire. 2 pack guards were down, being tended to by others, wounded but alive. The air stank of ozone and rot. Lyra, in human form, her silver blonde hair flying, was directing a group of enforcers, her voice high but steady. She saw us and rushed over. They came from the eastern tree line, no more than 5 or 6. They didn't try to enter. They hit the gate and vanished back into the dark. It was a message. Kale had shifted back, bare-chested amidst the chaos, examining the damage to the gate. His face was a stone mask, but I could feel the rage coming off him in waves, a cold, controlled fury that was more terrifying than any shout. "It's a diversion," he said, his voice cutting through the babble. His eyes found mine across the courtyard, to pull us from the clearing, to protect their asset within. He turned to Torin. "Rorik, now." The meaning was clear. The attack on the lodge was a cover, a violent sleight of hand. While we were distracted here, the real goal might have been to silence the prisoner we'd just taken. Torin and a contingent of guards sprinted toward the root cellar. The rest of us followed, a grim procession. The heavy wooden door to the cellar was intact, but Bowen emerged, his face ashen, a deep gash bleeding down the side of his face. "Alpha," he said, his voice rough with shame and anger. "I failed. They came through the old escape tunnel. I held them off, but they took him. Rorik is gone." A furious murmur ran through the gathered pack. Their alpha attacked, their home scarred, and now their prisoner snatched from under their noses. The sense of violation was palpable. Kale didn't reprimand Bowen. He placed a hand on the older warrior's shoulder, a gesture of absolute trust. "You're alive. That was the point. They wanted us to find you dead. This was a rescue, not an assassination. They need him alive." He turned to address the pack, his voice rising not in panic, but in definitive command. This was not a raid. It was a declaration. The Ashen Claw is not a phantom. They are here, they are organized, and they have help from within our territory. He paused, letting the grim truth settle. "Until we find the rot within our own ranks, no one ventures beyond the inner perimeter alone. Patrols double up. All outsiders are barred. We are on watch." As the pack dispersed to carry out his orders, a tight, hard knot of leadership remained. Kale, Torin, Bowen, Nessa, and me. Lyra lingered at the edges, her usual brightness dimmed by solemn duty. "The second traitor," Kale said, his voice low. "The one you saw, Alara. Tell us." All eyes turned to me. The weight of it was immense. To speak it would make it real, would fracture the council, would ignite a witch hunt. I saw the fear in their eyes, not of me, but of the truth I held. I took a steadying breath, the circlet cool on my brow. In the clearing, when Rorik looked at me, I saw his memories, his meetings. I met each of their gazes in turn, finally landing on the one whose face had been in those stolen glimpses. It was Orlin. The silence was absolute. Orlin,
the pack's quartermaster, the keeper of supplies and logistics, and Werewolf of average strength but unparalleled organizational skill, the one who ensured the stores were full, the weapons maintained, the patrols provisioned. He had access to everything: routes, schedules, inventories. He could starve us, disarm us, and lead an enemy right to our doors without ever lifting a sword. Torin was the first to react, a low growl building in his chest. Orlin? He is a clerk, a paper pusher. A paper pusher who knows every grain of wheat we have, every blade we own, and every path our patrols walk, Bowen said quietly, the tactical implication dawning. He could starve us, disarm us, and lead an enemy right to our doors without ever lifting a sword. Cale closed his eyes, a muscle twitching in his jaw. The betrayal was of a different, more insidious kind, not a warrior's defiance, but a spider's patience, weaving a web of vulnerability around them all. "We take him now," Torin insisted. "No," Cale said, opening his eyes. They were chips of flint. "If we take him openly, it confirms we know. It sends Fenris deeper into hiding. Orlin is a link. We watch him. We feed him carefully crafted lies. We use his network to trace it back to Fenris." It was a dangerous, brilliant strategy. It required perfect control, perfect acting. "He will be suspicious after tonight," Nessa warned. "He will know Rorik was taken and then rescued. He will be waiting for a reaction." "Then we give him one," Cale said, his gaze settling on me. The intensity in his gray eyes was overwhelming. "We give them a distraction they cannot ignore. We announce the awakening of the Starseer, not as a secret, but as a new power of Stonehaven. We present Ilara not as a problem, but as our renewed strength." My blood ran cold. "You want to use me as bait?" "I want to use you as a beacon," Cale corrected, his voice softening just a fraction. "The thing Fenris fears most is the old magic, the sight that can unravel his schemes. If we shine a light on you, all his attention, all his paranoia focuses there. It lets us move in the shadows he creates." It was a warrior's gamble to put the most vulnerable member of the pack at the center of the target. I looked from his resolute face to the anxious ones around us, to the scarred gates of my only home. I thought of my mother, hiding in fear. I was not her. The throne had chosen me. It was time I chose the role it offered. I straightened my shoulders, feeling the throne's hum align with my resolve. "Then let's give them a Starseer to fear."
The decision was a stone dropped into still water. The ripples spread through Stonehaven with deliberate speed. There were no more whispers in corners. Cale made the truth a banner, and he raised it high. The next morning, the entire pack was summoned to the main lodge. The air crackled with a new kind of tension, not just fear, but a breathless, fraught curiosity. I stood in an antechamber, my hands cold and damp, the silver circlet a heavy crown of expectation on my brow. Nessa adjusted the folds of my simple, dark green gown, a color of the forest, of resilience. "Remember," she murmured, her voice the only steady thing in my swirling world. "You are not pretending. You are Althea's daughter. You are the throne's chosen. Let them see that truth. The power is not in the flash of light, child, but in the certainty of your stance." The great doors opened. A sea of faces turned toward me. I saw Lyra near the front, giving me an encouraging, fierce nod. I saw Torin's stony expression, Bowen's assessing gaze, and I saw Orlin, standing off to the side near the supply ledgers. His face was carefully neutral, the perfect picture of a concerned quartermaster, but his eyes were shrewd, calculating, missing nothing. Then my gaze found Cale. He stood on the central dais, the Luna's throne beside him, glowing with that soft, persistent light. He was the eye of the storm, a figure of unmovable authority.
His eyes met mine, and he gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Walk. I walked. The throne's energy was a river flowing through me, steadying my legs, squaring my shoulders. The whispers rose and fell around me like wind through grass. I did not look at the pack. I kept my eyes on Kale, on the space beside him that was meant for me. I reached the dais and stepped up. I did not sit on the throne. I stood beside it, placing my hand on its cool, living arm. A visible ripple of silver light pulsed from the point of contact, a silent affirmation that echoed through the hall. A collective gasp followed. Kale raised his hands for silence, and it fell instantly. Pack of Stonehaven, his voice rang out, clear and commanding. You have witnessed the awakening of an ancient magic. You have seen the throne, silent for 5 winters, choose a bearer. Let there be no more doubt, no more whispers in the dark. He turned his head slightly toward me. This is Alara, daughter of Althea, last of the Star-Seer line. The throne has recognized her blood and her worth. Her sight is not a human trick, but a gift of our own deepest legacy. A gift that has already exposed a viper in our nest and saved your alpha's life. He paused, letting the weight of that statement settle. Murmurs of shock and dawning realization moved through the crowd. The attack on the gate was now framed not as a failure, but the enemy's desperate reaction to a threat we had posed. The Ashen Claw seeks to divide us, to make us fear our own shadows. They believe our strength lies only in tooth and claw. They are wrong. Our strength has always been in our unity, in our connection to this land, and in the wisdom of the old ways. Ilara's return is a sign that those ways are not dead. They are here. They are with us. He turned fully to me then, and in his eyes I saw the script we had agreed upon, and something more, a genuine, formidable respect. Starseer, he said, the title formal and resonant. Will you lend your sight to Stonehaven? Will you stand as our guide against the shadows that seek to consume us? Every eye was on me. This was the moment, the performance, the laying of the bait. I took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of the certainty Nessa had spoken of. I lifted my chin, and my voice, when it came, was clear and carried to the far corners of the hall, amplified by a will that was not entirely my own. I am of Stonehaven blood, I declared, the truth of it afire in my veins. This land is my home, its people are my kin. I will stand, I will see, and I will do everything in my power to protect this pack. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, from the back, a voice cried out, "For Stonehaven!" It was Lyra's. Another joined, and another, until the lodge echoed with the rallying cry. It was a fragile unity, built on shock and hope and the powerful charisma of their alpha, but it was real. As the chant subsided, Kale announced new protocols, paired patrols, the Starseer's advisory role in council. The pack listened, their fear now channeled into a sense of mobilized purpose. After, as the crowd slowly dispersed, I remained on the dais, a visible symbol. I felt Orland's gaze linger on me longer than most. It wasn't hostile, it was analytical, like a man recalculating a complex equation. The bait had been taken. The spotlight was firmly on me. Now we had to wait for the predator to circle into the light. The days that followed were a study in controlled tension. I was now a public figure, a symbol of the pack's renewed ancient strength. I attended council meetings, sitting beside Kale, the throne now permanently placed at the head of the table.
I spoke little, but I listened to everything, trying to absorb the complex web of pack politics, supply lines, and border tensions. Orlin was always there, meticulous, polite, and utterly opaque. He presented reports on grain stores, slightly lower than ideal due to a blight in the southern fields, weapon maintenance, proceeding on schedule, and patrol rotations. He suggested minor adjustments for efficiency, adjustments Cale quietly vetoed. He was the perfect servant, and I watched him, using not my new sight, but my old archivist's skill, observation. I saw the slight tightening around his eyes when a scout reported unusual silence from the northern passes. I noted the extra beat of hesitation before he answered a question about leather stores. He was worried. The plan was working. The beacon was shining, and it was disrupting his shadows. But the true weight of my role settled in the quiet hours. In a small walled garden within the lodge's inner sanctum, Nessa guided me in honing my gift. The visions were no longer violent seizures. They were becoming a landscape I could, with great effort, navigate. "Do not seek the grand prophecy," Nessa instructed, her voice like rustling leaves. "Seek the thread, a feeling, an impression. The future is a tapestry of countless threads. Your mother could see the whole weaving. You must learn to feel the tension in a single strand." I practiced with the circlet, focusing on mundane things. Where will Lyra go after her patrol? A faint impression of the kitchens, the scent of fresh bread. It proved correct. Will it rain before nightfall? A sensation of dampness on my skin. The skies remained clear. It was frustrating, inexact work. Then I tried to focus on the threat, on Fenris, on the ashen claw. The moment I turned my mind in that direction, the gentle landscape of my senses turned foul. A pressure built, not behind my eyes, but in my chest, a deep, aching cold. I saw not images, but felt sensations. The grit of ash between my teeth, the smell of soil that was not fertile but dead, a profound silence where the forest's song should be. I broke the connection, gasping, my hands plunged into the soft soil of the garden bed as if to reassure myself of life. "What is it?" Nessa asked, alarmed. "Death," I whispered, the taste of ash still phantom on my tongue. Not killing, something worse, a blight, a corruption of the land itself. The memory of my mother's journal entry surfaced, a shadow that would rot the pack from its roots. She hadn't meant metaphorically. That night I shared this with Cale in his private study. A fire crackled in the hearth, but the chill from my vision lingered. "A blight," he repeated, staring into the flames. His profile was sharp, weary. Fenris was always obsessed with purity, not just of blood, but of essence. He spoke of cleansing fire. He looked at me. "Can you locate it, this feeling?" "It's north," I said, the direction coming to me as I spoke. "And old. It's a place of long-standing sorrow." I reached for the memory, for the thread. A name surfaced, whispered by the land's own aching memory. The Mournwood. Cale went very still. The Mournwood is a cursed stretch on our northern border. Nothing grows there. The earth is gray and lifeless. It's been that way since before my grandfather's time. We avoid it. Maybe Fenris doesn't avoid it. Maybe he's drawn to it. Or maybe he's causing it. The implication hung between us, an enemy that didn't just want to conquer territory, but to poison it, to turn the very source of the pack's strength into a weapon against them. It was a desecration so profound, it felt personal. "We need to know," Cale said finally, his decision made. "A small, swift scouting party, Bowen, Torin, myself, and you.
My heart leapt into my throat. Me? To a cursed wood? Your connection is the only compass we have, he said, his gaze unwavering. You felt it. You can lead us to its heart. We go not to fight, but to see, to understand the true enemy. It was the most dangerous thing I had ever been asked to do, to walk voluntarily toward the source of the darkness I had felt. But as I looked at Cale, at the grave responsibility in his eyes, I knew there was no other path. The Starseer could not guide from a tower. I placed my hand on the table between us, not touching him, but an offering of resolute. Then we go. He looked at my hand, then back at my face. In the firelight, the harsh lines of his expression softened just for a moment. It wasn't a smile. It was something quieter, more profound, an acknowledgement of shared burden, of a partnership forged in the crucible of threat. We leave at dawn, he said. Prepare yourself. As I left his study, the fear was a live thing in my belly, but beneath it, thrumming in time with the throne's distant hum, was a thread of something else. Purpose.
The journey to the Mornwood was a descent from life into a painting of death. The vibrant greens of the Stonehaven forest gradually faded, as if the color were being leached from the world. The birdsong ceased. The air, once sweet with pine and damp earth, grew thin and carried a dry, acrid tang, like old bones and cold ash. We traveled in wolf form for speed and stealth. Cale, Bowen, and Torin were magnificent, powerful creatures of muscle and shadow. I rode on a specially designed litter secured to Bowen's broad back, feeling both helpless and profoundly protected. The throne's energy was a constant, warm coil within me, a defiance against the creeping cold. As we neared the border, the land itself seemed to grieve. I felt it through my connection, a low, psychic moan of loss that made my eyes water. This wasn't natural decay, this was a wound. We stopped at the last line of living trees. Before us stretched the Mornwood. My vision had not done it justice. It was a cemetery of trees, their bark peeled away, branches like crippled fingers clawing at a bleak sky. The ground was covered in fine gray powder that swallowed sound and light. And in the distance, at the heart of the desolation, stood a massive, ancient oak, but it was a mockery of life. Its trunk was split open, revealing a hollow core of deepest black, and from that darkness, a palpable malevolence pulsed. "By the Great Spirit," Bowen murmured. Having shifted back, his voice hushed with horror. "There," Torin growled, pointing with his snout. Movement, figures, wolf and human, moved around the base of the blighted oak. Their forms were indistinct, but even from here I could see their coats were dull and matted, their movements jerky, unnatural, and among them stood a man, tall, gaunt, with a face I knew only from Cale's bitter descriptions and the pack's grim histories. A jagged scar ran from his eyebrow to his jaw. Fenris. He held a staff fashioned from a branch of the dead tree, and it pulsed with a sickly greenish-black light that seemed to suck the dim daylight from the air around it. A wave of nausea and deep spiritual revulsion washed over me. This was the source. The blight wasn't just here, it was being cultivated, weaponized. I reached for the riverstone in my pocket, its warmth a tiny defiance. "We've seen enough," Cale said in a low human whisper beside me. His face was a mask of cold fury. "This is not a camp, it's a shrine to decay." But as we turned to retreat, Fenris's head snapped up. He couldn't have seen or heard us, we were too far, too well hidden. But he felt us, or rather, he felt me. His gaze swept across the dead tree line, and for a heart-stopping second, I felt the cold touch of his attention brush against my senses, like a slug on skin. It was searching, probing for the source of the living energy that dared to witness his work.
The throne's hum within me flared, a silent silver shield. Fenris's eyes narrowed, his head tilting like a predator catching a strange scent. He took a step toward our hiding place. Kale's hand clamped on my arm. Move. We melted back into the dying forest, our retreat swift and silent. The feeling of being hunted, of that cold gaze scraping against my soul, didn't fade until we were miles from the Mornwood's border. Back in the relative safety of the living woods, we stopped by a rushing stream, as if to wash the contamination from our spirits. Kale shifted back, his expression grim. He's not building an army to overrun us. He's creating a plague. He means to spread that death, to turn our territory into another Mornwood. The land is the pack's strength, Bowen said, his voice rough. Without it, he didn't need to finish. The pack would wither, become weak, desperate, easy prey for the Ashenclaw, who seemed perversely adapted to the dead places. Orlin, I said, the connection firing in my mind. The lower grain yields, the blight in the southern fields. What if it's not a natural blight? What if he's already testing it, spreading it slowly, quietly, through the supplies he controls? The horror on their faces confirmed my fear. The betrayal was not just about information, it was biological warfare, a slow poison for the land, delivered by the hand they trusted to sustain them. Kale's fury was a silent, terrifying force. We end this, now. Orlin leads us to Fenris, or he is removed. We can no longer play his game. He looked at me, his eyes reflecting the fire of the stream. Your public role has drawn his eye. Now we use it to force his hand. We will let slip a piece of information, through a channel he trusts, that the Starseer has located the heart of the blight and plans a ritual under the next full moon to cleanse it. It was a direct challenge, a declaration of war on Fenris's very purpose. He would have to act. He would have to come to stop me. He will bring everything he has to stop you, Torrens stated, the tactical risk clear. And we will be waiting, Kale said, his gaze holding mine. There was no question in it, only a stark, shared resolve. Not in the Mornwood, on our ground, at the sacred clearing, we choose the battlefield. The plan was set, a final, desperate gamble. We would use me as the ultimate bait, not just to catch a spy, but to draw out the serpent's head and crush it. As we made our way back to Stonehaven, the weight of what was to come settled on me, but alongside the fear was a crystal-clear certainty. This was why the throne had chosen me, not for politics, not for peace, to be the light that stood against the coming blight.
The full moon hung in the sky like a watchful, judgmental eye. Its light bleached the color from the world, turning the sacred clearing into a stage of silver and black. I stood at its center, feeling terrifyingly exposed. The plan was simple, and therefore fragile. I was the flame, Fenris was the moth, and Kale, with every able warrior of Stonehaven concealed in the tree line, was the waiting hand. We had let the information slip through a young guard we knew Orlin had cultivated, a tale of a powerful cleansing ritual, a Starseer's desperate attempt to heal the land at its most potent hour. Orlin had taken the bait. His movements in the past 2 days had been a flurry of covert activity. He thought he was orchestrating the perfect ambush. My role was to sell the lie, to stand here and channel not a cleansing, but a beacon of pure, defiant life. The throne's energy was a torrent within me, held in check. The circlet felt like a dam, focusing the power. I began to move, a slow, deliberate dance my mother's journal had described for grounding rituals. I didn't chant, I listened. I listened to the heartbeat of the healthy forest around me, the sigh of the wind and living pines, the distant chuckle of the stream. I drew that sensation of life into me, letting it coalesce into a visible aura, a soft, silver light that began to emanate from my skin. It was the most difficult acting of my life. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide.
I was a single glowing target in a vast, dark field. Then I felt it, the same foul, grasping cold from the mornwood, slithering into the clearing from the eastern tree line. It wasn't a physical presence yet, but a contamination of the air, a blight on the moonlight itself. My breath hitched, but I didn't break the dance. The bait had been taken. From the shadows, figures emerged, not with stealth, with an arrogant, slow certainty. Wolves with dull, ash-gray coats and eyes that glowed with a sickly yellow light, the Ashen Claw. And among them, in human form, Fenris. He looked gaunter in the flesh, a specter of hatred. His scarred face was twisted in a contemptuous smile. In his hand, the blighted staff pulsed with its necrotic energy. "So," his voice rasped, dry as dead leaves, "the last Starseer pup thinks she can play with forces beyond her ken. You dance prettily among the graves your mother chose." His words were meant to shatter my focus. Instead, they hardened it. This was the wolf who had hounded my mother to her death. This was the poison threatening my home. I stopped my dance and faced him, letting the silver light around me flare. "This is not a grave, Fenris. It is my home, and you are not welcome here." He laughed, a sound that held no joy. "Home? You are a weed in a garden of wolves. I am the fire that cleanses." He raised his staff. The Ashen Claw wolves fanned out, beginning to encircle me. "Take her. The throne's power must be extinguished at its source." This was the moment. The trap was sprung, but the prey was more vicious than we'd hoped. As the first ash-gray wolf lunged, a black bolt of fury shot from the trees. Kale. He met the wolf mid-air, the sound of their collision a sickening crunch of bone and fury. That was the signal. The clearing erupted. From every shadow, Stonehaven wolves poured forth. Torin and Bowen led the flanks, a hammer of fur and fang meeting the advancing Ashen Claw line. The silence shattered into a cacophony of snarls, howls, and the clash of bodies. It was chaos, beautiful and terrifying in its primal violence. But Fenris's eyes were only on me. He began to advance, his staff carving ugly green-black symbols in the air. The sense of blight intensified, a creeping numbness that sought to drain the life from the very grass. "Kale!" I cried out, but he was locked in combat with two Ashen Claw enforcers. Fenris was almost upon me. I did the only thing I could think of. I stopped drawing in life, and I pushed. I focused every ounce of the throne's energy, every memory of sunlit glades and rushing water, into a single concentrated blast of silvery light aimed not at Fenris, but at his staff. The beam struck the corrupted wood. For a second, the sickly green light wavered. Fenris snarled, stumbling back a step. The blight's pressure receded. But I had exhausted myself. The silver light around me guttered. I swayed on my feet, the world spinning. Fenris regained his footing, his eyes blazing with mad rage. "You dare?" he hissed. He pointed the staff directly at my heart, "then wither with the rest." A vortex of black and green energy shot from the staff's tip. I was too drained to move, to deflect it. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. It never came. A massive, midnight black form slammed into me, knocking me to the ground, covering me completely. Kale! He took the full force of Fenris's blast on his back. I heard the sizzle of corruption meeting living flesh. I smelled burning fur. Kale shuddered above me, a strangled, pain-filled sound escaping him, but he did not move. He shielded me with his own body. "No!" The scream was torn from my soul. The sight of him, hurt, possibly dying for me, broke something open. It wasn't fear. It was a rage as pure and hot as the sun. The throne's energy, which I thought was spent, roared back to life. But it wasn't just from the stone, it was from the land, from the pack fighting around me, from the fierce, desperate love burning in my chest for the wolf who shielded me. I didn't channel it, I became a conduit for it all. A pillar of argent fire erupted from me, passing through Kale harmlessly and lancing towards Fenris. It struck his staff, and this time the corrupted wood screamed. A hairline crack split its length, and a wave of concussive, cleansing force exploded outward. Every ashen claw wolf was thrown to the ground, the sickly light in their eyes snuffing out, replaced with confusion and fear. The blight in the air dissolved. Fenris stared at the cracked staff in his hand, his face a mask of utter disbelief and shattered faith. His weapon, his symbol, was broken. Kale rolled off me, shifting back to human form with a gasp of pain. A vicious, blackened wound marred his shoulder and back, but his eyes were clear, fixed on Fenris. Around us, the battle had stopped. Stonehaven wolves stood victorious over dazed, defeated foes. Fenris looked from his broken staff, to me, to Kale struggling to stand, to his fallen followers. The fanatical light was gone from his eyes, leaving only the hollow shell of a broken dream. With a final, inarticulate cry of rage, he dropped the staff, shifted into a gaunt, scarred gray wolf, and fled into the darkness. No one gave chase. The heart of the poison had been drawn. The rest was a mopping-up operation. I crawled to Kale, my hands hovering over the ugly wound. "You're hurt." He caught my wrist, his grip weak but sure. His eyes, full of pain and a fierce, triumphant light, found mine. "It's a scar," he said, his voice rough, "a small price for a future." And as the full moon shone down on the clearing, on the victorious pack and the broken blight, I knew he wasn't just talking about the battle. He was talking about us. Victory, I learned, was not a single shout of joy, but a long, aching sigh of relief. The days after the confrontation were a blur of healing and reckoning. The Ashen Claw survivors, freed from the corrupting influence of Fenris's Blightstaff, were a pitiful lot, broken wolves, most of whom swore they had been promised a purified home, not the living death Fenris offered. Their fate would be decided by council, but exile, not execution, seemed to be the prevailing wind. Orlin was found in his quarters, trying to burn his ledgers. He offered no fight, only a weary, defeated silence that spoke louder than any confession. The rot within was cut out, cleanly if not painlessly. But my world had narrowed to a single, sunlit room in the healer's ward, and to the man lying on the cot within it. Kale's wound was deep and stubborn. The healer, an elderly wolf named Briar, said the physical damage would mend, but the corrupting magic had left a taint that resisted her poultices. The skin around the blackened mark remained cold to the touch, the flesh beneath slow to knit. "The body fights the memory of the blight," Briar said, her hands gentle as she changed the dressing on the third day. "His spirit is strong, but the shadow clings." I spent every moment I could there, reading to him from historical texts, which made him smile a pained, amused smile, or just sitting in silence. The formal barriers between Alpha and Starseer, between the orphan and the leader, had been incinerated on that battlefield. What remained was something raw and real. On the fourth day, Briar left a bowl of salve and fresh bandages. "The usual herbs are doing little. Perhaps a different touch is needed," she said, her wise eyes lingering on me before she left. The implication was clear. My magic had broken the blight's power. Perhaps it could heal its scar. My hands trembled as I sat on the stool beside his cot. Kale was propped up on pillows, his torso bare, the brutal wound on full display. He watched me, his stormy eyes patient.
I don't know how to do this, I admitted, my voice small. You didn't know how to be a starseer, he said quietly. You learned. Trust your instincts, Ilara. I dipped my fingers into the salve, cool and fragrant with herbs. Taking a steadying breath, I focused not on the wound, but on the memory of the healing stream we'd stopped by, of the vibrant life of the forest. I let that feeling flow down my arm, into my fingertips and into the salve. It began to glow with a faint, pearlescent sheen. Gently, I applied it to the edge of the wound. Kale flinched, a sharp intake of breath. Cold? I asked, pulling back. No, he said, his voice strained. The opposite. It's warm. For the first time since it happened, it feels warm. Encouraged, I continued, my touch as light as I could make it. As I worked, the awful, dead blackness of the wound seemed to recoil from the glowing salve. Tiny tendrils of inky shadow actually seeped out of his skin, dissipating into the air like smoke in sunlight. Beneath, angry but healthy new flesh was revealed. It was working. A profound fatigue began to weigh on me, the cost of channeling such precise, gentle energy. But I didn't stop. I worked until the last of the black corruption was gone, leaving behind a severe but clean scar. When I finally sat back, dizzy and spent, the bowl of salve was empty and my hands were shaking from effort. Kale let out a long, slow breath, the tension finally leaving his body. The gray pallor that had clung to him was gone, replaced by a healthy, if tired, warmth. He flexed his shoulder experimentally, wincing only slightly. "Thank you," he said, the words simple and deeper than any formal gratitude. He reached out, not for my hand, but to gently wipe a smudge of salve from my cheek. His thumb was rough, calloused, but his touch was infinitely tender. The contact sent a shock through my system that had nothing to do with magic. Our eyes locked. The air in the small room became charged, not with power, but with a tension far more ancient. All the unsaid things, the shared dangers, the protected moments, the sheer magnitude of what we had faced together, it all coalesced in that silent look. He didn't pull away. His hand cupped my cheek, his gaze searching mine. I saw the alpha, the warrior, the leader, but I also saw the man who carried his burdens alone, who had taken a killing blow for me, who looked at me not as a tool or a symbol, but as Ilara. "When I saw that blast coming for you," he whispered, his voice ragged with memory, "I didn't think. There was no strategy. There was only... No." My heart felt too large for my chest. You could have died. "A world where you don't exist is not a world I care to lead," he said, the admission stark and devastating in its honesty. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were an overflow of a feeling so vast it had no name. I leaned into his touch, turning my head to press a kiss against his palm. It was a permission, an answer. He slowly, carefully drew me closer. I rose from the stool to sit on the edge of his cot. The space between us vanished. His other hand came up to cradle my face, and he leaned in. The kiss was not fierce, not demanding. It was a question, a confirmation, a promise. It was the soft, grateful press of lips after a long drought. It tasted of healing herbs and shared survival, of a future that was no longer a burden to bear alone, but a path to walk together. When we finally parted, foreheads resting together, the world had quietly reordered itself. The throne had chosen me, but here, in this sunlit room, I had chosen him, and he had chosen me. It was the only magic that truly mattered. The first frost of the season glittered on the grass like scattered diamonds, and the air held the clean, sharp promise of winter. But in the heart of Stonehaven, there was only warmth. 2 moons had passed since the battle. Fenris was gone, a fading nightmare.
The pack had healed, stronger for the trial, its unity forged in fire and sealed in trust. Orland's exile had been a surgical removal, and the pack's systems, under new, audited management, thrived. And in the center of it all was a change so profound it felt as natural as the turning of the leaves. Today was not the full moon, nor a zenith gathering. It was a simple, sun-drenched morning. But the entire pack had gathered in the sacred clearing, their faces turned not toward me or toward Kale, but toward us. We stood together before the Luna's throne, but it was not the throne that had once held me captive. In the quiet following the victory, it had undergone one final transformation. The stone had flowed and shifted once more, the roots and quartz veins weaving themselves into a new form. It was no longer a solitary seat. It was a throne for two, broader, with two distinct spaces that flowed seamlessly into one another, a physical manifestation of partnership. Kale wore a simple dark tunic, the scar on his shoulder visible but healed, a badge of honor. I wore a gown the color of the winter sky, and the silver circlet felt not like a tool, but a crown that belonged. He took my hand, his grip firm and sure, and turned to face our pack. There were no enemy shadows here now, only family. "Pack of Stonehaven," Kale's voice rang out, clear and strong in the crisp air. "We have faced the darkness and found our dawn. We have healed old wounds and uprooted fresh poison. Our strength was tested, and it held. But strength is not just the force to break an enemy. It is the wisdom to build a future." He looked down at me, and his eyes, those storm-gray depths, held a peace I had never seen in them before. "The throne chose a starseer to guide us from the shadows, and he paused, his voice dropping, becoming more personal, more raw. "I have chosen a partner to help me lead us into the light." He raised our joined hands. "Ilara, daughter of Althea, starseer of Stonehaven, my equal in every trial and my heart's true compass, will you take your place, not as a chosen symbol, but as a willing Luna? Will you rule beside me?" The question hung in the air, the final thread of destiny waiting to be tied. I looked out at the faces of my pack, at Lyra, beaming with tears in her eyes, at Nessa, nodding with ancient pride, at Bowen and Torin, their respect earned and given. I saw the cottage dweller, the archivist, the outsider, the scared girl who sat on a throne by mistake. That girl was gone. I turned back to Kale, to the man who had become my protector, my ally, my mirror, and my love. My voice, when it came, was steady and carried the full weight of my truth. "I will." A cheer erupted, not the fierce war cry before, but a joyous, thunderous sound of celebration that shook the frost from the branches. Kale led me to our throne. Together we sat. The moment we settled into the stone, a final, gentle pulse of silver light flowed through the quartz veins. Not a surge of cower, but a sigh of completion. The connection was perfect, balanced. I could feel his steadfast strength, his unwavering resolve, and I knew he could feel my flowing intuition, my deep-rooted connection to the land and its people. We were two halves of a whole, Alpha and Luna, bound not by accident, but by choice. As the pack began to celebrate with music and shared food, Kale leaned close, his voice for me alone. "Do you remember," he murmured, "the first time you saw this clearing, hiding in the shadows?" "I remember feeling like I would never belong," I whispered back. He brought my hand to his lips, kissing my knuckles, his eyes holding mine. "You were wrong. You weren't just meant to belong here, Ilara. You were meant to help lead it, with me." I smiled, a true, unburdened smile that started in my soul. I suppose the throne knew what it was doing all after all. He laughed, a rich, warm sound I wanted to hear every day of the rest of my life. "For once," he said, "I am happy to admit it was right." We sat there, hand in hand, on the throne that chose me, as the sun climbed higher, bathing our pack, our home, our future in golden light.
The story of the girl who sat by mistake was over. The story of the Luna who rose by choice, loved by her alpha and her pack, had just begun. The end.